So initially I had planned to release a video today about Jonathan Hickman's East of West, but after going through the series I realized that there are still some things that I need to flesh out in order to make sense of the story. And so instead, what I want to do here is make a video on the origin of mutants in Marvel Comics. And what I'm hoping is that at the end of this, you'll have a solid understanding of their history, as well as why it took so long for Marvel to provide us with this information. So for a bit of history, in the 1960s when the X-Men were originally introduced, Marvel never actually took the steps to provide us with a source of mutants, and the reason for this is actually because of DC Comics. What I mean here is that during the 1960s when Marvel had become the frontrunner for Perfect Film and Chemical, its parent company who also owned a series of other publications, Marvel had to quite literally play catch-up by throwing everything against the wall to see what stuck in order to establish popular characters that could then be used for syndication. As a result, with Stan Lee and Jack Kirby at the helm, we were brought Spider-Man, the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, and the X-Men, among others. As a result of this standard of character introduction and storytelling, Marvel didn't have time to provide a comprehensive backstory on mutants, and instead had to create stories that could bring readers in and keep them here. And so in order to actually make sense of this, what we're going to do is we're going to jump back and forth between the publication histories of Marvel Comics due to the fact that various writers have covered the continuity of the origin of mutants in bits and pieces. Jumping to Uncanny X-Men Annual number 13 from 1989, the earliest depiction of Earth-based life came during the time when the humans were evolving from apes. Told from the perspective of the Watcher, during these early days, primitive humans were visited by the Celestials, a cosmic race of beings with vast powers. Led by Gaia, the mother of Thor, and who for all intents and purposes was the goddess of the Earth, primitive humans were taken aboard the Celestial ship, where their genetic structure was augmented by the Celestials, leading to the formation of three castes of humanity: the Eternals, the Deviants, and Mutants. Now switching to 1970, when artist Jack Kirby had left Marvel for DC where he launched the New Gods and the Fourth World line, which saw the introduction of Darkseid, because of creative differences, Jack Kirby had left DC and returned to Marvel in 1976. Because Marvel was still in the building phase of fleshing out storylines and establishing a foundation for their mainstay characters, in terms of chronology, 1976 was the first time that we ever saw the Eternals. But this story actually picks up after the events of Uncanny X-Men Annual number 13. Following their genetic manipulation by the Celestials, the Deviants went underground while the Eternals stayed above ground. As Kirby tells it, the experimentation of the Deviants led to physical deformities, and the various stories of people encountering trolls or monsters are a result of their exposure to the Deviants themselves. On the other hand, the Eternals were vastly powerful, and keeping in line with these themes of good and evil, were more on the order of angels. Now regarding mutants, where the Deviants took to the interior of the Earth and the Eternals took to the highest mountains, humanity stayed on the surface of the planet, but because of their genetic manipulation by the Celestials, evolved extremely fast, with their metamorphosis into modern man taking place over the course of thousands of years, rather than millions as it normally would have taken. At this point, things get a little spotty with mutants. Up until 2008, it was an established concept in Marvel Comics that Apocalypse was the first human to develop mutant powers some 5,000 years ago. However, with a Necrosha crossover focusing on the anti-mutant Reverend William Stryker and his Purifiers attacking the Xavier Institute, writers Craig Kyle and Chris Yost established that a character named Selene had been the first mutant and was born around 17,000 years ago in Central Europe. To sidetrack for a second, Selene was a long-standing character dating back to 1983 and was created by Chris Claremont. Originally, her heritage was ambiguous except to say that she was a sorceress with ties to Externals, a group of vastly powerful mutants who believed they were immortal. With Necrosha, Chris Yost and Craig Kyle gave a nod to the idea that Selene was a mutant, but this didn't become official until X-Force Volume 3, issue number 24, when it's explicitly stated that she's a mutant by the resurrected John Proudstar. Now following the birth of Selene, Marvel leaves us to our own devices to fill in the gaps on how mutants spread throughout the Earth. What I mean here is that if we assume that the original humans experimented on by the Celestials were in Central Europe, it would stand to reason that Selene is a byproduct of that experimentation. Using this line of logic, we could make a legitimate argument that due to human migratory patterns, these humans with latent mutant genes would have spread from Europe, leading to the birth of Apocalypse 12,000 years after Selene. Furthermore, as the years passed and technology became advanced enough to allow for global exploration, these genes would have been mixed with normal human DNA, leading to the explosion of mutants during the 1950s and the 1960s within the Marvel Comics. And in truth, we can actually trace this theory to its fruition. As an example, following the birth of Apocalypse and the emergence of his powers, he had walked the Earth for around 4,200 years before he encountered Bennett du Paris in 12th century England. While Apocalypse uses access to celestial technology to wake up Bennett's latent mutant powers of telepathy, telekinesis, and teleportation, leading to his adoption of the name Exodus. Somewhere around 250 years ago, Mystique appeared. However, because no actual date was assigned to her birth, it's almost impossible to know exactly how old she is or when she was born. But continuing along this line of logic, following Mystique came Wolverine, who was born in the 1880s, as well as Name of the Submariner in the early 1900s, followed by the explosion of mutants in the 1960s, leading up to the current day. With that being said, we're going to bring this video to an end. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will catch you guys later. Peace.